My Horror and I, welcome to the extraordinary meeting of council this morning. Apologies, there are apologies this morning.
Decided to initiate a series of plan phases, and then eventually in 2015, those were combined. And you can see councillors that are around the table still receiving. So
So the objectives have been in place since 2021. They provide really clear direction for all the rest of the rules, but also for Southland in terms of how we should be doing our work to give effect to these clear objectives. So I thought just to remind you, just the two Kodawai objectives there are really critical, and just wanted to put those up so that everybody remembers. They've been in place for quite some time, but they're important now that we've got the rest of the rules beyond challenge. So the first one there on the left in terms of Te Mana o Te Wai and what that means for us in Southland, it's our local articulation of what Te Mana o Te Wai means. And so that's as it was articulated through the process, but also the words were in the initial versions of the plan. And the second objective there around Kiu Te Kitai, so that literally translates to the mountains to the sea, but the intention there is that it recognises the broader interconnectivity between water, the land, and the wider ecosystems as well, and the importance of it for the health of our people too. So where are we at right now and what's before you right now? The Environment Court decisions that we have had before us over the last few years, we've had 9 of them. We also had a consent order decision. So as part of the process, there was quite extensive mediation. That's all kind of closed shop for those of you who haven't been involved in one of these before. But what the judge ends up looking at is you put up your joint decisions from those mediations, and then she orders a consent order. So we've got one of those as well. And then the 9th interim decision, which is attached to your large swag of papers, is where the majority of provisions are now resolved through. So there are a number of provisions still before the courts, and we'll talk about one of them after we've done this first item, but we have policies 42, 54 and Appendix L5 that are still before the Environment Court. Rule 24 relates to the High Court decision, and also Rule 78, which is also before the High Court, through which we've requested an adjournment. So what will change from here? The provisions have been treated as operative following each decision. So as we've gone through this process, every time we get a decision from the court, those provisions move into what's known as treated as operative or beyond challenge. A number of our provisions have been strengthened through the process, as we've previously talked about. Intensive winter grazing rules, the farm plan connection. We have a new rule for pasture wintering. There was additional rules relating to discharge consents. We have some new maps. So all of those things are different than what was there before, but broadly building off of what the council had previously intended. So what has that meant in practice? Well, every time the consents to these plans that are on the screen before these other 2 plans, the regional effluent land plan and the previous regional water plan, every time the consents team get an application or receive an inquiry, they have to look through 3 or 4 different existing plans and the layers of rules that sit in amongst all of those. And they also, same applies for the compliance team. So anytime they're looking at a potential incident or a compliance situation, they again have to look in multiple places to find which of the rules we will apply. When the decision that's before you hopefully is made, those other provisions will drop off. So the landscape in terms of what rules will still apply will be simplified somewhat, both internally but also externally. There's a huge amount of legacy rules in here. Some of these plans go back to 1990 when the RMA was, first here. There was a note in. We presented some of these slides to the staff to give them an update of what was happening, and there was a note in there about how some of our staff are younger than the plans are, which I was. Whether I was going to mention or not, but it's fair to say that technology and the knowledge that exists both across the region and in the building has moved on significantly since the 90s, and so it is an exciting step to be able to say that some of those more legacy rules or historic rules will be dropping off. It will provide some more certainty for certain activities out in the region. And the other thing that we've included, so myself and Liz have delegation to make corrections and minor adjustments. So that's like clause 16 changes. So they've been included as well. They're typos, those sorts of things, but hopefully just tidy things up a little. And so from here, the timeline for making provisions operative. The council meeting from today and the decision being sought then triggers a public notice requirement. We will then set that operative date as the 27th of May. The reason why the date's important is because it's the beginning of the clock starting on the 6 months. So if the plan now requires resource consents, then any existing activities will have 6 months from the 27th of May to be able to comply with those new requirements. So they either need to comply with the new permitted activity conditions, or they need to seek a resource consent. And so over the next few months, we will be working with stakeholders, with industry, and with community. We've got fact sheets on the train and all sorts of other materials that we'll be able to be sharing out in the world to help people to figure out what it is they need to know in order to comply with the new rules. Some of that's already happened. We let the parties of the appeal know that this meeting was happening, and we've had a couple of preliminary conversations with them in order to make sure that we've got doors open for those further conversations. So in terms of where to next, and whether or not the plan may be affected by any future government decisions, this is our plan, as the chairman's already noted. It addresses issues prevalent in our region. It's targeted to our specific situation. The recent announcements from government are forward-looking ones. They're about what happens next. The NPSFM changes and any future discussions on that is about where we go from here, as opposed to what this plan covers, which is making sure we were doing that foundational step. It provides our foundation and helps us to move towards our outcomes. It gives us certainty in terms of our farm plans, our controls for intensive intergrazing, as well as wastewater and other consents for discharges. Any future changes to any parts of it in terms of elements that were either outside the scope of appeals or things that, as you compromise through a process, elements that you might want to tweak, that would enable further good actions around wetlands or those sorts of things, that will require a future plan change. And we need to continue to work with you to figure out what that might look like. And the third part of where to next is we will be continuing conversations with the government on other possible changes to the national direction. As we talked about in strategy and policy this morning, there are a suite of changes that the ministries are proposing, both to the RMA itself, but also to the NPSFM and the National Environmental Standards. And we want to be making sure that we are tightly with them on that and offering to help as we can. So that was all of my slides, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions.
This has been a long journey, but are there any questions for Lucy at this stage? I'd just like to say we're probably in quite a good position on having a plan that has evolved and been submitted on, and while it's only the foundational document, we're better than perhaps some other areas that have still got something in place. Peter.
Yeah, look, I'd just like to reiterate that, Mr. Chairman, it has been a long time coming. And just like to make the point that it is the state for Southland in some of these provisions, I think. And to acknowledge all the work that went through, Councillor Roy and Rodway and all those hearings. I come to those hearings. That was a long time ago, wasn't it? It was a pretty intense time. I think there was in over 900 submissions. Was that right?
931.
931. So it was quite an intense time. A lot of people had their say, and there's a lot of Southlanders that are quite familiar with this work and this plan already. They know it. So I'm quite comforted by that. So yeah, good work.
Eric.
Yeah, I think, it's a red letter day. We've come to a point where we can move on. I want to acknowledge the work that Lucy's done through the appeal hearings and also Philip and the team in actually landing in a place which is acceptable. It's not what we would have probably preferred, but it is acceptable. This was phase one. It's taken 10 years. We've now got next thing on the agenda, which is the FMUs and how we're going to go. So my question is, timeframes for that, and what lessons have we learned through this process that we can do it quicker than a decade next time?
I think from my perspective, whilst this has been happening, others have been doing their plans and dealing with similar elsewhere in the Motu. And I know one of my colleagues up north of the South Island has been on the same length of journey but has avoided most of the court time, has mediated everything else that they can. I think for me, big lesson would be let's front load some of that as we move forwards. Let's make sure that we are bringing tight groups of people together and having conversations that are solution focused and practical and pragmatic in the first instance. And then the regulation being one of the levers that you can pull as opposed to the only lever. So that would be one of my lessons. That and just keep chugging along and keeping your chin up and hoping that you'll get to the end, because it is way more stamina than I think a lot of people appreciate. It takes an awful lot to keep on going when there's it's a lot to work through.
Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I have a question on a couple of minor details in the appendices. The court's decision, which is appendix 5,
Page, Morris.
page 16, well, it's page 16. Yeah, page 16, I think, of your papers. But on page 31, at the very bottom, in clause 7, H, talks about land that's going to be either cultivated or winter grazed, used for pasture winter grazing. And the question I have is, then it says, and used for sacrifice paddocks. And I wonder whether that's supposed to be or, because it seems to be an anomaly there. I know this is from the court, and you've probably looked over it 1,000 times, but it seems to me that using a sacrifice paddock is a method of winter grazing. Just perhaps double check to make sure that's not meant to be an or rather than an and. And the same thing occurs on page 8 under a winter grazing paddock. That's where it does say or, sorry, rather than and. So there might be an inconsistency there. Have you found it?
Just thinking back to those early submissions, I think there was some on the concept of a plan B, which wasn't a Pelican necessarily, you actually went to an event, and it was somewhere that was going to have less environmental effect from memory, but you guys were on that panel.
So thank you, Chair, and thank you, Morris. It should be or, so we can correct it as part of one of the tools.
Well, that's a really important distinction in the interpretation of
Yeah, so
land use.
So it's the rule connection is correct, but it's the wording that you've just picked up with. There's an inconsistency. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah. You're going to laugh at this. But on page 49, in the table of contents, which is under the plan itself, that's our plan, not what there's a mistake in the table of contents, because this is error, but not applied to Olympic zone policies. We'll fix that
Thank you.
later.
So the reason why it looks like that is because that's what it looked like in the ninth interim decision. So it's a direct extract from the ninth interim decision. So in terms of the actual error in the document, the actual document itself, it's just puzzle.
And on page 121, which occurs twice, under Rule 24, which we'll be talking about after, but this is just a spelling error. It's got Rule 24B, got the word sediment or, it should be separated.
It's a mentor.
Did you see that, Lucy?
The Rule 24, there was a spelling error.
Yeah, it's got cement ore, and it should be sediment ore, it should be sediment.
It's space.
And that occurs
There's somewhere else as well.
Through you, Chair, the errors that Morris picked up, we need to make as part of the 15 changes before you make the decision to make them operative. So they need to be added to. They have to be added to the core 16 change list. Those changes prior to you making. So we can do that as part of this, but they just need to specifically be noted. So those are the changes.
So the second place where this occurs, then Lucy. So
No, I'm sorry, I couldn't, it must be just that one. I thought before there was sediment or twice. Check that.
As a separate one. We need to make a separate resolution to make those changes as core 16 ones prior to you making the rest of them.
So is that before the 1 to 8? Okay, Jeremy.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman, have you finished? On page 159, under the definitions, this is in our plan, page 1. No, sorry, page 200 in your papers. There's no definition of a sacrifice paddock, and I think perhaps there should be. Definition of grazing and other stuff. It is talked about in other parts of it, but there's no definition there in the. One, or it should be
given another name, is it? No.
sacrifice paddocks weren't something that we talked about in the original hearing. Actually, it came in.
Thank you. Matt, we're ready with all of these. Through your chair, the sacrifice paddock definition is in the NES.
In the,
In NES, the National Environmental Standard. So we have.
does it need to be there? Okay. Nearly there. There's a incorrect in the Schedule 1 of the Arete Conservation Order, which is listed here. So this is on your page 255. It just needs to be in the original order. If you go to the government website and look for it, under Schedule 1, Item 1, outstanding characteristics or features, and it's got habitat for brown trout, angling amenity, and then in the same line it continues value in accordance with Tikanga Maori, which is correct, but it's all on the same lines that it sounds like it's angling amenity value in accordance with Tikanga Maori rather than being two separate things. If it was copied correctly from the conservation order itself, there are 3 lines there, not. You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
So that just needs to be clarified. And that's all. Thank you for your tolerance and patience.
Thank you.
Morris, Jeremy.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Morris, doing that. My English
I've only
at
got
school
one-
weren't too good, so
I've only got one job, so I all day.
that's good. That's good. Look, reflecting on this, we're adopting it. I actually appreciate it. I'm looking for the right words here, and I think that you indicated acceptable, because there are, there are a few of us probably aren't 100%. Nothing's ever going to be 100% perfect, but it's to build on that base is going to be crucial. I've got a few. Just wrote a few things down here, and interpretation will be crucial in looking ahead on how we take 300 or how many pages and able to interpret it to our community and say, this is actually what it means on the ground. And I know that there'll be, our focus will be on local interpretation. We do know there are a few issues around farm plans being implemented within 6 months, and that basically mean that some farmers will be non-compliant. just by the timelines and things like that. So there are little things that we need to look at, but that'll come back to how we want to interpret it and how we want to work with the community on this. I just want to say a big thanks to all we came on this council 7 years ago. Some of us, and this was all go. It was probably why we got put on here too. Got voted on because there was a few people disgruntled out there when all of a sudden rules and farming. What do you mean? So nowhere did I think I'd be still sitting here just 7 years later saying we're only getting this through to this point, which is there's more to come. So, but yeah, Lucy and your crew, and it's been, I know it's been interesting. We've had lots of discussions, and obviously, and I know that, you know, there's been frustrations and things like that, and where it's a new, how should I say, time of enjoying dealing with courts and high courts and things like that, and sometimes, you know, personally, that it's pretty interesting how they come to decisions and things like that, but that's law in New Zealand, and we have to live with it. But it's looking forward, and now it's how we bring the community in, explaining this. And remember, the first three things that I think we needed to do when I first got down here was communication were the three important things, and that's still relevant right now to be able to sell this. So yeah, so I'm just saying I'm not trying to be negative, but it's about how we work with it now. And I appreciate can't forget our very wise legal counsel out the back. Not quite time to retire. He might have made enough to retire, but I appreciate all the discussions and everything to get here too, Phil and Matthew. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks, Jeremy. And you know, reflecting back, I think both Phillips and my hair was a bit darker when we started this.
Gandalf.
And while there's been some changes going through that one or two people might take some issue with, most people have said to me, at least your plan, we have a chance to submit whether we got everything we wanted or not, that it was a democratic process. And I certainly hope by the time we do it, there's another plan that the RMA will be amended to only allow the Environment Court for points of law, because we have had a two-tier system where people with deep pockets don't need to come to the table at the same time. So that'll be some of the learnings out of it. Are we at the stage where we can move Morris's first point, which is to what wording do we need there, Lucy?
16 amendments. Do you want me to move that?
Yes, so I got two noted. Did Jan catch the other two? There was, okay, perfect. So the wording is just that it needs to be moved prior to, right? Yeah, so the same wording that sits within your recommendations on the Clause 16, but you need to make it.
So Chairman, I'm happy to do that. That's recommendation 3 on page 5, in terms of it being now, not later.
Seconded by Jeremy. Any discussion on that motion? All in favour, say aye. Aye.
Procedural matter.
Procedural matter, okay. Welcome, Philip.
Feel free.
The resolution 3, as I recall it, was to note the clause 16.2 changes that had already been made. These are additional clause 16.2 changes, so the resolution is to make those additional changes under clause 16.2.
So we take out clause 3 and just make that.
Is that sequential, Phil? Do we need to, can we accept the resolution 3 first? Or
3 can go first, and then I'll add a 3 capital A.
So now we make another resolution. Yes. All right. So might
I will
Jan,
do that also.
And I'll move that.
can we get the wording for that resolution, please, so that it's clear? Do you want to provide us with that? No, I don't.
Philip might help us with that.
Get rid of the first motion.
No,
No,
it can still stand.
So we'll just confirm the first motion stands because it's the existing changes. So you passed a motion and that's fine.
So the wording should be a resolution 3 capital A, make the following additional minor corrections to the proposed Southland Water and Land Plan in accordance with clause 16.2 of Schedule 1 of the Resource Management Act 1991, and then list we have 2 changes or 2 further corrections. You've got all of those, yes, so just list those out.
Okay, we've had a mover and seconder for that. Everybody understands the motion? I'll put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. 3A, we can probably get back to the top of the page now, can we?
I'm going to move those.
So we're moving the remaining.
Yes, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Moved by Lyndall, seconded by Paul. Any discussion? If not, I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. Well, we have no extraordinary urgent business. The final item at 9 is public excluded business. Jan will give us the reasons to move into public excluded. Sorry.
Matters subject to appeal to the Environment Court, so it's section 42A is qualified for section 42(1)(b).
Having heard the reasons, would somebody like to move into public exclusion? Moved by Neville, seconded by John. All in favour will say aye. At the stage, we'll have to ask any members of the public to depart.
Milestone.